Former city manager Emilio Gonzalez has filed to run for mayor of Miami. He's now joining a growing field of candidates in the November election. I sat down with him to talk about why he wants to return to City Hall. Colonel Gonzalez, thank you so much for joining us here on Impact.
Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure.
So you've been out of the political world for a few years now.
Correct.
And now you've made it official that you are running for mayor of the city of Miami. Why this and why now?
Well, interestingly, the why is very self-evident. And in fact, it's because of people like yourself and other news media that have been reporting the total dysfunction in our city for the last several years. It's intolerable. It really is. And I had people call me months ago saying, hey, you should do this. Think about doing this. We'll help you. We'll fund you. And I never really thought about it seriously until earlier this year. And it's almost like Miami is a self-licking ice cream cone of dysfunction, okay? There isn't a day where you don't read about something, hear about something, the trial, a verdict, a settlement. We've become a joke. And in fact, when I resigned as city manager several years ago, in my resignation letter, I used the fact that Miami has turned into a circus, and I am not going to be part of the circus. And now we have an opportunity, I think, to fix this. You
were city manager for 2 years, and as you mentioned, you resigned from that position. Why did you resign?
I resigned that position because my wife ended up in the hospital. She was in intensive care for a while. She had major heart and lung issues, and at that time I realized that given the antics that were happening, there was actually a move to terminate me.
There was a campaign to terminate you by some on the commission.
Correct, because I would not toe the party line. I would not agree to things that were disagreeable. And then I had to choose between taking care of my wife, which is my #1 priority, and showing up every 2 weeks to the circus. And at this point, I think I'm a little old for the circus.
Did you feel that by stepping down, perhaps you were giving in?
No, because by stepping down, my #1 priority was to take care of my wife. And that takes priority on everything. Everything else is secondary. So, they talked a good show about how they forced me out and this, but no, that was my decision to make. And in fact, if they had waited another 30 days, I would have done the same thing. So they just sped up the process. But I don't regret it at all.
After that failed campaign to try to get you fired, there were some allegations about some sort of impropriety about you and a permitting issue. Those accusations were cleared. But do you feel you still have to clear your name?
No, at all, because I took into account where the allegations came from. They threw everything at me, and they accused me of felonies, violating state statutes. All of this was fake, but it's par for the course around here. If you can't talk to issues, you talk to people, right? There's that saying that says that great minds talk about ideas, average minds talk about events, and mediocre minds talk about people. And that's what we had come down to. It was all personal. It isn't like I can disagree with you on a policy issue. No, it's that personal, I'm going to destroy you. And it hasn't only happened to me, it's happened to other people in the city. I just happen to be probably the highest ranking or the first one. And that's got to stop. That really has to stop.
You talked about transparency, but how do you bring transparency to the city of Miami? How do you plan on doing that?
You can't be having projects, funding organizations and issues without telling people. I mean, there's just so much going on in the city that the residents don't know about. I'll give you an example. I was one of the people that voted for that famous $400 million bond, remember, for resilience and affordable housing. I'm not sure we've ever really been informed as to what happened to that money. I think that's just an example, but I think we just need to be very clear with our residents. Unfortunately, what happens at City Hall right now has very little bearing on the residents. It's almost like a predator city, right? People sit up there, they make decisions, they spend money, and the residents sort of like have no idea what's going on.
When you talk about transparency, that sounds an awful lot like DOJ, and the governor has wanted to implement that throughout the state.
When Emilio Gonzalez is elected mayor, my first act will be to ask the governor to send a Doge team to the city of Miami, across the board. Commissioners' offices, CRAs, the Bayfront Trust, you name it. I want to see, by the way, Doge is essentially talks about expenditures. The Doge doesn't really indict people. Doge will look at somebody's budget and it will show you how are you spending your money. And too many times, the categories are very broad at the top. And then you have to peel the onion back and see, really, what does this mean? I want to know how we're spending our money. And I want to know if it's being spent in a frivolous way.
Okay, so far you've been talking about problems at City Hall, but what about the residents of the city? What do you think is the biggest problem that they are facing that you would want to tackle?
Well, listen, there are any number of problems. Okay, you know, we have a housing affordability issue. We have a climate change issue, flooding. We have issue with trying to keep our kids here. You know, people go to school here and then they leave because they can't get a job or the jobs don't pay enough. But all that are things that we can talk about and we can discuss, but you can't do that if the residents don't trust their city administration. And I guess that's my point. It starts at the top. We can have the best plan in the world for helping affordable housing. But what happens if that plan is in the hands of wrong people? That plan's never going to see the light of day. Worse, it'll see the light of day for somebody or someone or some company that's a favorite at the time. So my issue right now is we need to reform the political culture, which will allow having an open, deliberate conversation about housing, about traffic, about sea level rise, about any number of things.
You are a man of many hats. You served in the military, you rose up the ranks to colonel, PhD, city manager, successful businessman, and these are positions of power. And now you're running for mayor of Miami, which many would argue isn't a powerful position. Would you want to change that?
No, not at all.
Would you support it becoming a strong mayor position?
The office of mayor in Miami is one that does not have direct power, but it has a great deal of influence. Remember, the mayor appoints the city manager, so it's incumbent upon me to have a city manager that's my clone, that thinks like me, that there's no daylight between me and the manager. The mayor has veto authority, and the mayor is also the head of the commission. So the mayor has an opportunity to influence bad legislation, good legislation, and even introduce legislation. Again, you're right, it's not a mayor like you see in some traditional cities, but there are opportunities there for a mayor to influence the right things at the right time for the right people, which the right people being all the city. I have no problems with the structure now. I would not change it to a strong mayor. I don't think it's necessary at this point anyway.
Well, you have about 6 months left in your campaign. Good luck to you, Emilio.
Thank you so much.